Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome back to Bengals On The Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry, continuing our countdown of the top 100 greatest players, Bengals players of all time. And we left the last episode with Mike Reed, who is one of the most talented players the Bengals have ever had, but not higher on the list because he didn't play long enough and he went and did other cool things. The next player is also one of the most talented players they've ever had, and I guess all these guys are, but I'm setting up the story here as we continue this. But his career didn't go as far, and he's probably not rated higher on this list, although some people may have him as like some of their top 5 favorite players in their childhood or, as they watch the team the last 20 years or so. But the reason he didn't go higher was because of all the things he did and towed the line between right and wrong, fair and foul, maybe over aggressive at times, maybe just a little bit too rough around the edges at times. And it got him suspended and fined. And he was a villain. And he wore that, I think, pretty proudly. And the team absorbed it for a few of those years here. Of course, I'm talking about linebacker Vontaze Burfict.
You know who's a villain in the NFL right now? That would be Vontaze Burfict.
I don't know what Burfict think the next move for him really is. Because the next move is probably out of this league.
Pittsburgh Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell says Vontaze Burfict has, quote, gotta go.
You know what, Vontaze? Enough is enough.
A lot of people say that, oh, he's a dirty player, he does this, he does that. And there's a fine line in football. And I think that I'm right at that line.
By Vontaze Burfict.
The Cincinnati Bengals signed Vontaze Burfict as an undrafted free agent after the 2012 draft, where he was originally expected to be a top pick going into the year after a fantastic career at Arizona State. The problem is some of his antics, some of his character issues flared up throughout the season and in interviews during the pre-draft process, and he bombed the combine as well. It was a bad process for him. Teams got scared away, and he was left there for the Bengals, who built a relationship with Vontaze Burfict through Marvin Lewis during the draft and signed him, and quickly found out that, this dude is really, really good, and he ended up starting in his rookie year.
Boys, and do our job. Feel me? All right.
After starting 14 games as a rookie in 2012, Vontaze Burfict ended up playing 7 years in Cincinnati through the 2018 season, playing in 75 games and starting 73. You can add another 3 playoff games to that list. His impact was felt immediately, not just talent, but intelligence, instincts, feel for the defensive side of the ball, and his presence as a physical, punishing hitter. Very quickly, that side of the ball absorbed Vontaze Burfict persona and toughness and physicality, and they became a very, very good defense.
Both drafted late on 2nd and 10. That pass is deflected high in the air and intercepted. It's Vontaze Burfict. On a 2nd and 10. And Brady is slammed down by Vontaze Burfict.
Burfict would make a Pro Bowl in 2013 in his second year in the NFL, starting 16 games, recording 171 total tackles, 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, 6 passes defensed, 1 interception, and a fumble return for a touchdown. This would be the last time he would start more than 11 games in a season due to injuries and suspensions. When the Bengals had Burfict, other teams hated playing them. And most of the fans liked that he was on their side. He was one of those guys. You never wanted to see him lined up across from you because you didn't know what he was going to do.
Exactly what it is, but when you're a big guy my size and you see a jacket that fits, you get it. There's the play the Bengal defense was looking for, and that's an interception. 6 minutes to go, a 3rd down and 4, and Taylor thinking about running it, and he will not get there. There's another one, and it's picked off. That is Burfict down the sideline. And he's still on his feet, and Wentz knocks him out of bounds inside the 20. Taylor rolls. He's hit. He's down. Vontaze Burfict.
Burfict just was coming in trying to police things that time.
Steelers have all their timeouts. Trying to drive to get an attempt at a winning field goal. Jones, middle of the field, and that is intercepted, and it's Burfict who comes away with the football.
Watch what he does, though. 55. What a job. Read the quarterback. He was going outside, stopped it, then broke back inside to get the interception. Awesome job.
Question. Burfict, and he is probably the #1 enemy of the Steelers on that opposite side.
I didn't mean to spend so much time talking about the downsides of having Burfict in the league on your team and the distractions that came with the maybe having other teams think the entire Bengals were dirty because of the way Burfict played. Because he was good. He was so good. It was honestly cutting up the highlights and looking at him again and watching. I ended up watching a few games. He was so good. It was crazy. He could have been fantastic if he could have controlled himself. And if it was 1975 to 1985, to be honest with you, if he was in a different generation, he's probably a Hall of Fame player and a Ring of Honor candidate because they loved that stuff back then. He just couldn't play within today's rules and keep it together. But when he was out there and when he was on, man, he was very, very good. Moving on this list with a player from the 80s that made a lot of big plays and big moments. And when I was watching a lot of I didn't know how good he was. I knew he was good. I knew he was regarded as very good. And then I started to watch, and there was a couple of Steelers games, and then Lynn Swann's, they're like, Bradshaw going deep to Lynn Swann, intercepted by this guy. And it happened routinely, like where he's covering very, very good players and doing his job. Number 35 on the 100 greatest Bengals is cornerback Louis Breeden.
For future reference, there are names to remember. Safeties Bobby Kemp, Brian Hicks, Oliver Davis, and Mike Fuller. Cornerbacks Ken Riley, Ray Griffin, John Simmons, and Louis Breeden, number 34. All help build the spirit that built a winner.
36 of the Bengals, Bradshaw back to fire, and he's going long for Swann. Intercepted by Louis Breeden. What an interception. He took it right out of Swann's hand. Bradshaw going long for Swann. Intercepted by Breeden. His second of the game. Breeden at the 30. At the 34 and out of bounds.
A scoring attempt became another notch on Louis Breeden's belt. It makes no difference to Louis Breeden whether you run or throw.
Louis Breeden was a 7th round pick, 187 overall in the 1977 draft out of North Carolina Central. He would play 10 seasons in Cincinnati, appearing in 134 games and starting 115, plus 4 playoff appearances.
After only 3 years in the NFL, Breeden is rated among the league's best defensive backs. The Bengals defense grounded Air Coryell and buried the Chargers. Cornerback Louis Breeden scored on the longest interception return in Cincinnati history, 102 yards, and the Bengals beat the highest scoring team in pro football, 40-17.
Third and about 2.5. Fouts going for it all to Joyner. Intercepted by Breeden at the 5-yard line. This guy is just something special. All right, Plunkett on play action. And it's picked off by Breeden. Louis Breeden. Look out. Louis Breeden to the 35-yard line.
Breeden was known for his speed and ball skills, routinely running with the fastest receivers in the league and coming down with 33 career interceptions, returning 2 for touchdowns.
Picked up, the Hogs blocking the bigger men, letting the smaller Breeden slip through.
O'Brien from the shotgun. Going end zone, picked off by Breeden. Louis Breeden with the interception.
The Bengals continued to have a great cornerback duo after Lamar Parrish left. It was he and Ken Riley, who we'll see those two much later. And then they inserted Louis Breeden into that vacated spot to go across from Ken Riley, and didn't really miss a beat. And Breeden wasn't a perennial Pro Bowler or anything like that, but a very, very good player that made first team All-Pro in the 1982 season. We've been on defense for a while now, it feels like, and now it's time to flip forward and go to the offensive side as we're in the top 35 players, and we've got a couple running backs coming up today, a couple Johnsons. So, I mean, that narrows it down pretty quickly. The first one on the list is Rudy Johnson at number 34.
Running back Rudy Johnson emerged as a solid replacement. In just 5 starts, Johnson finished the season with 957 yards rushing.
Straight up the middle, Rudy, 50, 40, 35, 20 down the sideline. They won't catch Rudy Johnson. Touchdown.
Rudy. Against the Texans in Week 10, Johnson carried the ball a team record 43 times and finished with a career-high 182 rushing yards. Cincinnati held a 22.5-minute advantage in time of possession, and Johnson scored the winning touchdown in the 4th quarter. The Bengals trailed 7-0 early, but maintained composure with help from running back Rudy Johnson.
Left side, Rudy. Rudy! 10, 5, touchdown! Rudy Johnson! Rudy's in the house!
Rudy was running back Rudy Johnson. In his first full season as the Bengals' primary ball carrier, Johnson rushed for a team record 1,454 yards. Under the tutelage of running back coach Jim Anderson, Rudy also set a Bengal record for the most carries in a season. Johnson's uncanny speed and power resulted in a team record tying 5 games of 100 or more rushing yards. Rudy Johnson's incredible season started with him running through defenses and ended with his first trip to the Pro Bowl.
Rudy Johnson, 13 yards away from the century mark. Rare to do against Pittsburgh. Here he goes on the outside at the 10, the 5. He is in the end zone. Another touchdown for Rudy Johnson and the Bengals.
They ran right at the Steeler blitz. Chris Hope comes on the blitz right at the play, and Johnson ducks right inside of him. Dick LeBeau must be thinking, what do I have to do? Look on the left. There comes Hope, and he's untouched, and Rudy Johnson gets right inside of him and ends up getting past the tackle of Polamalu into the end zone for a touchdown.
Johnson warding off the hit by Polamalu to dive into the end zone.
Well, by gosh, Dick, let's look at that right now. Here comes Polamalu from the right. Instead of wrapping up, he tries to take Rudy's legs out from under him. He's unsuccessful. Wow. That was a lot of good things by the Cincinnati offense.
The 100th overall pick in the 2001 NFL Draft out of Auburn, the Bengals got Rudy Johnson in the 4th round and let him sit behind Corey Dillon for a couple years until they needed him in 2003. After taking over for Dillon, Johnson would average 1,300 yards on the ground and over 10 touchdowns for 4 straight seasons.
They'll give it to Rudy, right side, big hole across the 20, breaks out of a tackle, 25-30, breaks another one, 35-40.
Looking like a human bowling ball. Rudy is a man possessed. The Chiefs are no longer undefeated. What a football game for Cincinnati. They are back.
Playing in Cincinnati for 7 years in total, 81 games, 59 starts, 5,742 yards on the ground and 48 touchdowns. The yards ranked now 4th in Bengals history. The emergence of Rudy Johnson helped balance that 03 to 07 Bengals offense that wanted to throw the ball, and defenses really would have stayed in 2 high shells with the weapons they had on the outside. But Rudy was such a good running back, and with the offensive line that could run it down your throat and move you at the point of attack, Rudy Johnson with the contact balance of a bowling ball would just bounce off of would-be tacklers, gain extra yardage, find a way to get more than what it should have been blocked for him. He'd fall forward for an extra yard or two. Great in the red zone as well. Just a steady, strong runner.
Delay, give, Rudy Johnson breaking tackles. Another one inside the 10. Polamalu with the angle, not in time. Touchdown, Cincinnati. He just broke away from Chris Hope. Steinbach threw a big block, and the Bengals drive it for the touchdown.
Not able to get him to the outside, and the Steelers, their biggest worry is that if the Bengals start running the football, oh man, look out.
20-yard touchdown run. He had been contained on his first 5 carries for only 8 yards, but breaks the draw for the score.
And the blocking, Reggie Kelly, oh, nice block on the outside by the tight end, allows Rudy Johnson to go up inside.
Then he shakes off Hope.
Rudy Johnson, just a fantastic runner for that era and that time, and honestly kept that offense as balanced as it was. So we only have a few more running backs left to go on this list, and they're all great. And honestly, Rudy's great. The Bengals have a good chunk of runners on it, and one of the guys that blocked for him, while we've already seen Levi Jones, we've already seen Bobby Williams, we'll get Willie Anderson later. Eric Steinbach did not make it, just did not play long enough. But what an athlete he was, and when they're kicking him, pulling him out, I give him a second to hear. He was fun to watch because he could get out there and run with linebackers. It was pretty crazy. But one guy that played a long time for the Bengals at center, he played some guard early in his career as well, but the guy that blocked for that team and blocked for a lot of players that's in this top 100 list, at number 33 is center Rich Bram. Rich Bram was drafted in the 3rd round, 76 overall in the 1994 draft out of West Virginia. But he was drafted by the Phoenix Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals, and never made the roster. The Bengals would bring him on in 94, and he would stay for 13 seasons. Does that count as spending your entire career as a Cincinnati Bengal, even though you're drafted by another team? He never played for another team. 13 seasons in the NFL, 146 games, 142 starts for Cincinnati. I'm starting this off with clips from the 05 season, but I mean, Rich Bram was there for a lot of good seasons and a lot of good quarterbacks before that. And don't get me wrong, just one playoff appearance in 2005, but we will show these clips here from the 95, 96, late 90s Jeff Blake era as well. And don't forget, he did block in 97 for Boomer Esiason and then for John Kitna in 03.
Holtz 30 and Rudy Johnson. Rudy rumbling down to the 16 and a run for 14 and all. Right up the middle by the center, Rich Bram.
Yeah, it really was. Up inside, you're having some success running inside. Rich Bram, you're right, Jim. What a block in there. Just seals it off. And what this does, it slows the game down a little. It's a cold offense off the field.
Go ride him again for more yardage, and he's free. Chris Perry, that little stumble may have prevented a touchdown. Picks up 30.
Yeah, those are back-to-back plays of Richie Bram climbing to the second level, getting his hands on those Indianapolis Colts linebackers and washing them into the ground. He was surprisingly agile and quick in his old days. I only knew Richie Bram when he was older, watching him play, in that 02, 03, 04, 05 era. And then I went back and watched the 90s games, and he's pulling from the left guard spot. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense why he was still really good at his older age, getting to the second level with angles and knowing who to get, when to get them. And you see it in these clips. Blocking for greats in the top 100, Rudy Johnson, Corey Dillon. We mentioned the 4 quarterbacks that are going to be in the top 100 here also.
That's a nice job on the left side by Kevin Sargent and Rich Bram. What it is just man-on-man blocking. You give him a little crease. That's Sargent number 77, Bram number 74. He comes around, kicks out. Corey cuts right up inside. Good job of following his blockers.
Bram has really turned into one of the league's better pulling guards.
So that's 2 running backs he blocked for in the top 100. That's 4 quarterbacks he blocked for in the top 100. How about the receivers? Chad Johnson, Carl Pickens, Darnay Scott, TJ Hushmanzada. There's 4 more there as well. And then the offensive linemen from the early days of Joe Walter still being there, Willie Anderson, and then to the 2000s team, we mentioned Levi Jones and Bobby Williams, all on these offensive lines for the Bengals. And then in 06, they draft Andrew Whitworth. In his last season with the Bengals, Richie Brams would be in 07. I mean, we're talking about a guy who has touched or been around or impacted a lot of top 100 greatest Bengals of all time. And that last clip was posted on YouTube from a fan that was at a game when Richie Bram hung it up and said he was retiring. The Bengals did a ceremony for him at the 50-yard line, thanking him. Anytime you play from 1994 to 2007, you're going to be one of the longest tenured Bengals of all time. And Richie Bram was that. And speaking of tenure, we only have 1 player left on this entire list that spent less than 7 seasons in Cincinnati. And he's more of a unique case, and he's at 6 years. So, if you're thinking of, who could be left, and we're getting whittled down a little bit here as it is, but these are all guys that spent significant time. And while I'm at it, 8 years was the average for top 100 players. I got some other stats we'll get to when we get to the end, but 8 years is the average for a top 100 player, which kind of hit me a little bit on these guys. And we're going to move on to number 32 on this list. And I hinted towards it. We got a running back, another Johnson. Once we finish with 32 here, we're only going to have 2 running backs left to dive into. And number 32 on the 100 greatest Bengals is Pete Johnson.
The addition of rookie Pete Johnson meant that the Bengals could field the Ohio State connection, with Johnson at fullback and the elusive Mr. Archie Griffin running from the halfbacks. The Ohio State connection combined for more than 1,400 yards of total offense, as Griffin was among the team leaders in receiving, while Johnson led in rushing.
Massive fullback Pete Johnson, number 46, set a Cincinnati rushing record with 160 yards.
While game's leading rusher was Pete Johnson, who powered his way to the game's biggest touchdown. The Bengals defeated the Browns 10-7.
Your Cincinnati Bengals all-time touchdown leader, Pete Johnson, was a second-round pick in the 1977 draft out of Ohio State.
3-man set, so Pete Johnson gets the call. One more look. There's no way Colsey is going to hold on to that man or take him backwards. So the game is tightened. We'll be 67. 3rd down 7. Hendricks, bam, makes it difficult for Anderson to get him off, but Pete Johnson struggles close to a first down. What a job. Billy Brooks in motion. Anderson. He goes to Johnson, and Johnson's been breaking tackles all night. Johnson, 1st and 10, Cincinnati. Quick toss, Johnson. Johnson got a good block from Archie Griffin.
Johnson would spend 7 seasons in Cincinnati, appearing in 94 games, carrying the ball 1,402 times for 5,421 yards and 64 touchdowns. An absolute unit. Johnson was gigantic, listed as a fullback, but the Bengals, I mean, it's different era, different kind of football if you're not that old. Fullbacks, running backs, they both carried it back then, but when you're 270 pounds, defenders were bouncing off of his thighs. He was the epitome of a power runner, a goal line touchdown vulture in today's fantasy football lingo. Pete Johnson was consistently churning out ugly yardage. But he was surprisingly nimble for a big dude, catching 173 passes in his career for 1,327 yards through the air and 6 touchdowns.
Steps up wide, they give it to Johnson. He's got a big hole and blasts out over the 30-yard line. Here, their offense has been blunted by 3 turnovers. Johnson with a big hole, running over people for a first down.
Pete Johnson was part of the 81 Super Bowl team, so he appeared in 4 playoff games, including the 82 season, carrying the ball 61 times for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, along with 9 receptions for 52 yards. Pete Johnson's rushing yardage now ranks 5th all-time for the Bengals, while his touchdowns are 1st. His 6,748 total scrimmage yards ranks 8th all-time in Cincinnati.
Finesse is not a priority in the Bengals' running attack. It relies on power, and power is defined by the man that fills out the jersey of number 46. Inside this wrecking ball facade lurks a runner with all the options that Forrest Gregg admires.
Pete Johnson is the type of fullback that I like. And when you give him the football and you give him any type of daylight, he's going to make yardage. He's going to make that tough yardage for you. When Pete gets rolling, he can intimidate the opponent by just his sheer power. I know that defensive backs, once he gets in the open, they don't like to tackle him. When you measure his size against theirs, I can certainly understand that.
As a runner and receiver, number 46 led all Bengals with 16 touchdowns. Pete Johnson, a plow horse among NFL thoroughbreds, met 1981 head-on and ran away with his first 1,000-yard season.
We started today's show with a linebacker and 2 power runners and a gritty center and, a bunch of tough, nasty dudes. And that's cool. And we're going to keep it moving and go to maybe a finesse player here at number 31. One of the best deep threats the Bengals have ever had. Probably the second best number 2 receiver. I keep wanting to say these guys are the best number 2. I said that for Darnay Scott. Who is? Maybe you leave it in the comment. Who is the best number 2 receiver in Bengals history? We've got the second. We got one more to go after this in the next episode. I'm talking about number 81. Coming in at number 31 is Eddie Brown.
At the other end of the Bengals passing game was the sure hands of Eddie Brown, who leads the active roster in all-time receiving yards. And Eddie Brown's 10 receptions, 2 for touchdowns, fell just 1 shy of the team record.
Eddie Brown was the 13th overall pick in the first round of the 1985 draft out of Miami. He would win the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year for 1985, as well as the Sports Nation and Pro Football Writers Association, after playing 16 games, catching 53 balls for 942 yards and 8 touchdowns. That was a 17.8 average. He averaged 16.9 for his career. Eddie Brown would last until 1991, playing his entire 7-year career with the Cincinnati Bengals.
There's Eddie Brown. He grabs it, gets away from man. 15, 10, down to the 5, touchdown.
That means he was part of the 88 Super Bowl team. He also made a Pro Bowl in 1988, his only Pro Bowl, but he played in 102 games starting 99 and caught over 6,000 yards receiving.
He was injured at the start.
Good protection, good lead pass, caught by Brown. The race is on. Touchdown, Bengals.
Eddie Brown is 6th all-time in Bengals receiving yardage and 5th with 41 touchdowns through the air. And his 16.9 yards per catch that I mentioned earlier ranks only behind Isaac Curtis. So this guy was a deep threat.
Playing better than they have the last 2 weeks. Wilson. A big one to Wilson and Eddie Brown. He fooled everybody.
Now, some will remember Eddie Brown for not being Jerry Rice, as Eddie Brown was drafted just 3 picks ahead of the best player of all time, Jerry Rice.
Esiason going deep for Brown, who makes the catch. Touchdown. He throws deep down the middle for Brown. Touchdown. Eddie Brown looking for Brown. Throwing for Brown. Touchdown. Good fake by Esiason, looking deep. Lets a long ball go. Eddie Brown's after it, and Eddie Brown's in for a touchdown.
Eddie Brown is the 7th highest player on our 100 greatest Bengals of all time. So there's still 6 more receivers to go, which seems pretty crazy considering we only have 3 more running backs, but only a couple more linebackers to go as we enter the top 30. And this is someone to me that every time I watch these old 70s and 80s games, I was like, this dude is good. He is really, really, really good. And I'm surprised more Bengals fans don't talk about him. I've heard Bengals fans say, Takeo Spike's best linebacker to ever play for the Bengals. Talent? Sure, maybe. They might be right on that. Some have said Vontaze Burfict. And I'm like, maybe. If he would have applied himself, maybe. And then it's this guy here at 30 that I think never gets talked about enough with the younger fans. So this is the series where I'm like, let's highlight these kind of guys that are top 30 players in franchise history that you're overlooking. And at number 30, also wearing 55, is Jim LeClair.
Bengal defense was fundamental defense. 11 men pooling their talents to make it go. Swarming gang hits wore down the opposition's will to win, and directing the assault was middle linebacker Jim LeClair, number 55. Every unit needs a commander, and LeClair was that and more for the Bengal Team D, respected by teammates and foe alike for his ability to jam up the middle. The strength of the fourth-year pro once enabled him to pin a bear, while his mobility and speed to the outside frequently allows him to blow down a sweep or dissect a passing lane. A fierce hitter, LeClair headed one of the NFL's best goal line defenses, a unit at its best when backed into the shadow of their own goalpost.
Jim LeClair was a 3rd-round pick, 54th overall in the 1972 draft out of North Dakota. He would spend 12 years for the Cincinnati, playing only for the Bengals in the NFL before moving on to the USFL New Jersey Generals. But from 1972 to 1983, he was with the Bengals, playing in 158 games and starting 128. Playoff appearances in 73, 75, 81, and 82. Jim LeClair would make 1 Pro Bowl in his NFL career. That came in 1976 as he started every game for a good Bengals defense.
Hooks. Didn't make it. Jim LeClair. And the punting team comes on for Buffalo.
to stop. Let's take a look at that very solid Cincinnati defense. The linebackers, Harris, Williams on the outside, Leclerc and Cameron, the two on the inside. Very tough group.
They didn't keep stats back in the day for everything, but based on what we have now, Jim Leclerc would tally up 10 interceptions, recover 10 more fumbles, 1 for a touchdown in 1979, and add 7.5 sacks in his career. So not overly dynamic in pass coverage or as a pass rusher, but it looks like, based on the games I've watched, he accumulated a ton of tackles, and he was the guy setting up that defense. So we've got a smart, instinctive leader, physical, hard-hitting middle linebacker wearing number 55. What else is new in Cincinnati? 2 of them make the list today.
Quick bounce out of the backfield. Winslow. Oh, as soon as he caught the ball, Jim Leclerc and Cameron were right on his back.
Jim Leclerc, the greatest pure linebacker to play for the Bengals, overlooked by us and by the NFL during the '81 Super Bowl.
We got Archie Griffin. Tom Dinkel.
I'm Jim Leclerc.
Bunch of mid and late round picks on today's episode, including one undrafted player to kick us off in Vontaze Burfict. We're going to end today's episode and getting into the top 30 with number 29 here with a top 5 pick for the Bengals. And he spent 7 years here. Again, somebody that I felt was overlooked nationally and then got his due when he left and went to San Francisco. But he was a really good player for the Bengals in his 7 seasons. Coming in at 29 is Justin Smith.
With the 4th choice in the first round of the 2001 draft, Cincinnati Bengals select Justin Smith, defensive end from Missouri.
Now, you talk about some picks that maybe the Bengals have made that you were not sure of. This young man from Missouri, motor. My God, you know exactly what you're getting here. I mean, many teams coveted this guy, Mel.
6'4", Chris, 270. And look at the speed. He ran a 4.62 during his workout. And I like the fact that, in addition to sacks, I think sacks can be very overrated. He set the single-season record at Missouri with 11, Chris, but 97 tackles led Missouri. That's impressive.
The 4th overall pick in 2001, the Bengals needed a defensive end. They needed some defensive help. They were at, this is right off picking Takeo Spikes, Brian Simmons. This was supposed to be the core of this.
Join Justin Smith, who had a franchise best 15 sacks in his first 2 seasons.
"15 sacks his first 2 years, the best the Bengals have ever had. That's a record for them. And he flew under the radar still. And that's with having 2 interceptions those first 2 years, 5 batted balls that first year, over 115 tackles in those 2 years combined. Justin Smith was active from day one.
Hey, Dick LeBeau doing a great job with the Bengals. They signed him just in time. First-round draft pick Justin Smith signed the week before the regular season, really the week of game 1.
Longest touchdown run from scrimmage. Lions look good in their first possession until Justin Smith reads the screen perfectly, gets his first INT.
Johnson. He is sacked by Justin Smith, the rookie from Missouri. His 2nd sack of the day for the Bengal defense. First for Smith. He's got 3.5 on the season.
And Justin Smith lined up out. They bring somebody outside of him. And Kenyatta Walker makes the mistake. He goes after the outside rusher instead of staying on the inside. You always want to stay big on big. Offensive lineman on big defensive lineman. Let your back pick up the blitzers.
You see the numbers for Smith in his rookie year. And
Defense is ready. Justin Smith taking a ride on Brunell's back. Bengals start the second half like they started the first. Justin Smith getting to Brunell again. He has 3 or 3.5, depending on who you ask. 13-yard loss on this one. Another record. This one on defense. You can call this a $2 million sack for Justin Smith. Breaks James Francis's rookie record. He now has 8.5 sacks on the season.
In 7 seasons total, he played in 111 games, starting 107 and accumulated 43.5 sacks.
Count, sacked by Justin Smith, and look at this, Tommy. Is that the nail in the coffin?
35-yard line's the line for Roethlisberger.
Hit from behind by the jersey. Throws it away. Intercept. No, they're going to rule the ball dead. Bernie ruled him down. He ruled him in the ground.
Justin Smith was a fantastic player that was overlooked in Cincinnati. If you look at his raw stats and go and look, when he left the Bengals, he spent 7 years with the 49ers. 7 in Cincinnati, 7 with the 49ers. He had 43.5 sacks for the Bengals. He had 43.5 sacks for the Niners. Even looking at PFF and looking at pressures and forced fumbles and fumble recoveries and all these other things, they're almost split right down the middle. He had the exact same career with the Bengals that he did with the Niners. But with the Niners, he made 5 Pro Bowls, 1 first-team All-Pro, and 3 second-team All-Pros. Why? Because the Niners were winning, I guess, because they're the 49ers? Well, had he gotten that recognition in Cincinnati those first 7 years, he'd probably be in the NFL Hall of Fame, and he'd clearly be in the Bengals Ring of Honor. And if he'd have stayed in Cincinnati, he would be in the Bengals Ring of Honor as well. So part of the story with some of these rankings is you see these guys go on and have better success, so good for them. And sometimes you see them leave and they don't have that success, or they're not going to be enshrined in a way of at least a Ring of Honor type thing. And, at the very least, I think a lot of players would like that. So this has been Bengals on the Brain. We're now in the top 30. And we have nothing but tremendous players that everyone loves from here on out. Not true. There's a couple of guys that people don't like that'll be on the next episode, and I'll be interested in that. The show is brought to you by First Star Logistics. As always, I'm your host, Joe Goodberry. Until next time, Hooday.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.